This is things I wish I could say in Sunday school. I want to share some thoughts and ideas that are different than what we usually hear. My goal is to be really honest rather than inherently faith-promoting. I hope these ideas may spark some interesting discussions with your friends, families, or classes. Please enjoy. This is the lesson for February 10th through 16th and February 17th through 23rd, Doctrine and Covenants, sections 10 through 17. Today's topics are the 116 lost pages, restoration of the priesthood, and witnesses of the Book of Mormon. The story of the 116 lost pages is quite the tale. This always makes me think about the TV show South Park because they discussed this in their episode all about the Mormons. It's season 7, episode 12. Basically, Joseph started translating the Book of Mormon and Martin Harris was his primary scribe. Martin Harris's wife, Lucy, was not happy about this. She believed Joseph Smith was a fraud. Her husband would spend all of his time with this man who claimed to have ancient gold writings from God, but no one could see the plates. I can imagine Martin and Lucy discussing this. Martin telling Lucy that he's been chosen and he's doing God's work by helping Joseph Smith as his scribe and then describing how. And Lucy replying, "So Joseph Smith is dictating to you, but you haven't seen the gold plates that he's supposedly translating from." Then Lucy explains that Joseph Smith is taking advantage of Martin Harris's good nature and trust. The reason he cannot see the plates is because this is all a fraud. There is no valid reason for Martin to not see the plates during the translation, except if they're not real. In addition to all the time, Martin Harris also gave Joseph essentially all of their money too. I think the tension at home was mounting for Martin. So Joseph Smith, in order to keep Martin on his team, allowed Martin Harris to take the writings. No one really knows what happened to them. I do think Lucy took them and stashed them so that she could prove Joseph Smith was a fraud when he retranslated them. I do not think there was an elaborate plot by Satan to alter the pages. I think Lucy Harris understood enough about what Joseph Smith was doing that just comparing the original 116 pages with the retranslation would show that it isn't really a translation. It's just Joseph Smith dictating a story in New Testament language. There was a long break before Joseph Smith started dictating the Book of Mormon again, from summer 1828 to spring 1829. I think it took Joseph a long time to figure out how to handle this, to create a story that explains everything and gets him around this problem of the lost pages. Hence, section 10 of the Doctrine and Covenants and the chapters in the Book of Mormon that miraculously speak to this. The church's official version of the story is that God knew the pages would be lost, and so God had another version of the same history in the Book of Mormon. God had a workaround for Satan's scheme to thwart Joseph Smith. Let's take a moment and think about this from God's perspective. God is going to instruct ancient prophets to create this record. Then he instructs them to create a second record too. God preserves the records for thousands of years through all the Lamanite and Nephite wars. That's a lot of work in order to get around losing the 116 pages. Wouldn't it be easier for God to just tell Joseph Smith not to allow Martin Harris to take the pages? The church answer is that this is a lesson that Joseph Smith needed to learn, that Joseph Smith was trying to get God to do what he wanted, rather than accepting God's will first and foremost. Joseph Smith learned his lesson and would only follow God's will going forward, no matter how difficult or unpopular. Cough, cough, polygamy, cough. To me, the church's story doesn't make logical sense. After this debacle, Joseph Smith dangled Martin Harris being a witness in order to keep him loyal and get more money out of him. Martin Harris put up his farm as collateral for printing the Book of Mormon. And Martin Harris lost his farm and his wife in the process. This lesson covers the restoration of the Aaronic priesthood. May 15th, 1829, Joseph Smith and Oliver went to the woods to ask God about baptism. John the Baptist appeared to them and conferred the Aaronic priesthood to them. Then Joseph Smith baptized Oliver, and then Oliver baptized Joseph Smith. They give a fair amount of detail to this story. However, with the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood, we don't get a detailed story at all. We are told that a short time after the Aaronic priesthood, Peter, James, and John appeared and conferred the Melchizedek priesthood to Joseph Smith. There are no first-hand accounts of this. Here's what I think actually happened. Joseph Smith didn't have his doctrines about priesthood and authority figured out yet. He moved forward and organized his church, and he did a bunch of stuff that would later be categorized as requiring the Melchizedek priesthood. So, he and the church retconned the story of the restoration of the Melchizedek priesthood. It makes no sense that this super important moment in the doctrine of the church would happen without any record or mention. Joseph Smith made up the story that made the most sense with where the church landed on the doctrine of the priesthood, and then circulated that story. But he didn't go hard on it, mention any people or dates or anything that could be impeached. I think this is a major issue in the foundation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Go ahead and read the current church position on it. Search Restoration of the Melchizedek Priesthood on the church's website or Google it, and it pops right up. The church claims there are numerous accounts of Melchizedek restoration, but the first one is from 1835, when this supposedly happened in 1829. The church basically argues that because Joseph Smith organized the church and conferred the priesthood to others, that he must have had it. It's really bad circular logic. I have mentioned my personal feelings about priesthood on earlier episodes. I think God's power is God's power. The church claiming God's exclusive priesthood authority is just about control. I don't see God choosing to limit his power to only male members of one faith tradition. I don't feel like priesthood makes me a better person or brings me closer to God, nor does it make any sense that God would restrict working his power through only men, excluding all women. I spent quite a bit of time thinking about the witnesses to the Book of Mormon while going through the material. I have known for a long time now that some of the witnesses of the Book of Mormon later said that they saw the plates through their spiritual eyes rather than literally seeing them. The church likes to push forward the narrative that none of the witnesses ever recanted their testimonies. Here are some of my other thoughts going through the material. The three witnesses all put a lot into this project. Martin Harris was a scribe. He donated money and mortgaged his farm for the publication of the Book of Mormon. Oliver Cowdery was the principal scribe for most of it, and he was very devoted to Joseph Smith. He didn't have as much money to donate, but it seems like he gave all of his time. David Whitmer gave a lot of material support. The Smiths lived with them for a long time, and I'm sure there was a lot of money donated. So, 2 of the 3 witnesses made large monetary contributions. I just hadn't really thought about it in those terms previously. It's clear from the historical record that these 3 men were all heavily involved in the Book of Mormon, but I hadn't seen the connection to money before. Also, the 8 witnesses. There's a lot of Whitmers and Smiths. 4 Whitmers, 3 Smiths, and Hiram Page. 8 witnesses sounds like a lot, but when 7 of them come from only 2 families, it stops sounding like a lot to me. Reading the 2 accounts, the 3 witnesses account doesn't mention touching the plates. It says beheld the plates and mentions the engravings a couple times, whereas the 8 witnesses account says we did handle with our hands, and later we have seen and hefted. Also, in the lesson material, it says that the angel Moroni showed the plates to the 3 witnesses. Yet that is not mentioned in the account included in the Book of Mormon, which I think is interesting. With the 8